my fellow speakers. This is Brian, the speaker for the dead, coming to you with another episode of Expanding the Expanse, Episode 7, A Shot in the Dark. I hope you're ready for another great episode. This episode starts on New Terra, and we see that the world looks very different right now than what we've seen before. You can see the moons around it. But the land mass is a very different picture than the one we've seen before. We see that, basically there's an ocean sitting on top of the ruins where our intrepid crew and the Belters and the RCE people are. So they're we see them in these beginning scenes, and they're trying to learn how to survive in this new environment. So you can tell there's kind of a desperation setting in just a little bit. But the RCE and the Belters have established separate camps. So you see Holden and Amos talking to Naomi up on the ship, and they're discussing this, and Amos is just like, so basically they're going to hate each other more than ever. and Holden's like, yeah, pretty much. And anyway, then we cut to a scene on the Rocinante, and we find the Barb only has a couple of days left before it falls out of orbit. Trying to work on a plan that will extend that period a little bit by using the batteries from the landing shuttle, and trying to get a little bit more time to figure out what to do with the Barb next. And then we find that Dr. Lucia's husband, Jacob, is being examined by Dr. Oye, and we find that he has the infection in his eye. And that's one thing you'll notice throughout this episode, that every close-up or every shot of somebody's face relatively close up shows them with green kind of tears or green blotches around their eyes. And the infection is spreading rapidly, but they're trying to basically say everything's okay, so as to not create a panic. So, I mean, which is smart. You know, they don't want to make things worse than they are. We see here that the head Belter lady, I don't really know her name. This is one of the times when you get a real good close-up. And as we can see right here, if you can see the edges of her eyes has got that green modeling on it. So she's infected just like everybody else. And then we see Murtry and his people discussing what's going to happen as food and water starts to run low, and that they need to be prepared and watch out for themselves and just be aware of what could happen. They briefly kind of discuss the fact that somebody was, that they took hostages at one point. So there's a lot of mistrust here, which has been evident throughout the whole season. Then we end up back on Earth, where we see Christian doing a speech on the airwaves, basically talking about the ship that almost hit the asteroid tracking satellite in orbit around the Earth. And the speech is one of where she's talking about like, we made a mistake and I'm kind of sorry and stuff. And then, through this scene, she's got these two political nincompoops that are sitting here with her. And it's just, you just tell the expressions on her face. So you can see she's not happy. And she and her husband are talking. She basically tells the two morons to get out of the room and stuff. And rightly so. I mean, her husband. And so this scene is another thing I want to talk about. I really have a hard time with Avasarala's husband this season. And I mentioned this before. Not just the fact that he's not the same actor that I wanted him to be. And maybe this is why he left. Because we see a real difference in Avasarala's husband, Arjun. And he's just kind of a douche. She's stressed. She's got all this weight. She's got all this weight, all this crazy stuff going on. She's in a job where she was kind of thrown into it because the other people that were around her were incompetent. Now she's running a political campaign for the first time in her life, and she's got these two idiots advising her and playing political games when she realizes there's so much more going on. And the political nonsense that's going on is distracting her from what she needs to be doing. And it's something you can see that she's never had to deal with before. This is a very new thing for her, that this is not her element, this political bickering and fighting. She was always the one in the background helping smooth this stuff out, and now she's the one up front having to take advice from incompetent people behind her. And that's basically what goes on. I mean, you really feel for her in this scene, where you just want to want to grab those two political research people, put them in a cannon, and launch them into deep space, because they're just stupid. And she's angry because they've made her look like a fool. Instead of capturing the culprits for who did the attack and coming to them from a position of strength and everything, she's coming in there going, "I'm sorry," which makes her feel like she's weak and incompetent. And like I say, in this scene, you really get see a divide between her and her husband starting to happen. It makes me feel bad for Avasarala again. I mean, she's flipping out here. She's angry. She's upset and stuff. But he's actually kind of helping to create that, because he's defending the two idiots that have just made her look dumb. And you kind of see a difference between, here's her husband, this academic guy, and here's her, the real world, get it done, handle emergencies, take care of problems. That's who she is. And so you see that divide between the academic who thinks everything's great. Oh, this is how it'll look in a book. That is not. And her practical experience going, you don't know what the hell you're talking about. And so you get that real world experience versus the academic perspective, and it's really interesting in this scene, and I really enjoyed this, other than it made me like her husband even less. So I mean, he really is just kind of acting like an ass when she needs him to be strong for her, to back her up, to be there as good counsel, and he's almost acting like a little kid. Well, you don't like my advice. It's really kind of sad. Anyway, then we cut to the next scene where Avasarala is being briefed on Marcos Aneros and the attack and how they almost pulled that off on the Earth. And it's a really telling thing. You learn a lot more about him and kind of what's led to things. They identify him as being on a different ship, and they start making a plan to capture him and bring him to justice. We see a general here in this foreground shot, and he is talking about how they're, whether the contingencies that they could just destroy the ship from distance. They could take out the engines with a railgun shot, and then have Marines go in and capture him. And so they're working on these two contingencies, and she tells them she'll decide and come back to him later when the options are in place. So this is kind of an interesting behind the scenes look at how things function, and you feel more like Avasarala is in her element here than in the previous scene with her. Then we see that the Dr. Oye figures out that Holden is the only one who is not affected by this eye ailment, and it's kind of a mystery, and so she takes him and wants to get blood from him, and basically she tells him, we've got maybe a day before everybody here is blind, which really unnerves him, because they realize that will make a bad and dangerous situation worse, because it will make people more desperate and feel more helpless in the face of that desperation. So they're really worried about survivability of the camp once everybody goes blind but Holden. Murtry, you see the next scene, you see Murtry come in and break up a fight between a Belter and one of the RCE people, and you get a real change in Murtry in this scene. You see a little bit of a different side to him than what we've seen in the past, where he actually seems like he's being fair to the Belters. He actually seems like he's making more sense. Now, he was part of the conversation with Holden where they discovered that this eye infection is going to render everybody blind. Then this next scene happens. Sorry, I forgot to mention that he was actually part of that discussion. And so you see a different side of him all of a sudden. And it kind of leaves you questioning, okay, what's going on? And then we see Dr. Oye and Holden discussing. So they're sitting there as she's doing the testing on Holden. they're talking about Miller. They're talking about his connection with this alien technology, how he's, and he's kind of complaining, being irritated about it. And this is another, again, one of the reasons I like Dr. Oye's character so well, or so much, is because she's such a scientist. She's such a fact finder, a curious, someone who's intensely curious. And she wants to, she is totally jealous of this connection. And she kind of berates Holden for his way of being about it. He's like, you're sitting there whining and complaining when any scientist worth their salt, any scientist anywhere would kill to be in your position. You have insight into the first alien culture we've ever encountered. So it's just, and you kind of see Holden looking at this like, wow, and you can see he has not been thinking of it like that. So it's really interesting. Then we see Amos show up and start talking to this little boy who we saw lost his parents in the last episode. They get basically taken away in the wave, or in the shock wave. And Amos figures out that this little kid can't see anymore. All he can see is green. And there's a real kind of a tender moment for him, where you get kind of a softer side of Amos, where you see that, as hard as Amos can be and as morally ambiguous as he can be, he really connects with this kid, that there is that empathy in him for people who are in the similar situation to the one that he grew up in, or that he was in. And he realizes this kid can't see, and he tells the kid that I'll be the eyes for both of us. And he basically gives hope to this kid and stuff. It is a really cool moment for Amos's character. And it's one of the things I love about Amos's character. You get these little insights into him that are so different than what we come to see Amos as regularly, and it's a lot of fun and interesting to see the development that his character's going through, or has gone through. Anyway, now this brings me to what I really want to discuss, probably more than anything. There is this scene where we see Felicia talking with her mother, Alex, and Naomi on the Resonante. This scene makes me want to punch somebody. Okay, and here's my problem. Now, I don't have any problem with her. It's not, she's a girl. There's no ulterior motivator other than, so this girl looks like she's 16. Now, maybe I'm off on her age. I don't know. But from what we get, she's never been to university. She's never had any kind of real training, real career kind of guidance. That she's had a little bit of hands-on here and there. And so they share this idea. Her mom shares this idea with her, and suddenly she starts talking like she's a PhD level engineering graduate. Okay. And the worst part is you've got this black guy standing in the background looking like a school kid who doesn't know what to do with himself, while she's standing there going, we're going to build a tether, and then we're going to build this thing, and we have to build this other thing. And I can't remember the word they use. It's like a gantry. We got to come up with a gantry, and blah, blah, blah. She's rattling off all this stuff. And I'm just like, this is the most unrealistic thing I've seen happen in this show. You've got a 16-year-old girl with no training who's suddenly a genius. Okay? Now, I have a major problem with that because we have no reason to believe that this kid could do any of this. None whatsoever. Okay, this isn't Wesley Crusher on The Next Generation, where we see that he has been a super genius kid his entire life, who came on the Enterprise as a 15 or 13-year-old and already knew everything because he'd studied schematics of this shit. He was just a smart kid, and we get that all the way through that show. There's this buildup that this is a smart kid. He's going to go right to the top of the class because he knows everything. Now, we've met, everybody's probably met people like this in their lives. They're just smart people. Well, we never get that that's what she is. Up until this point, we get snotty teenager acting out of her. which up until this point, I had no issues with her character. But at this point, her character goes off the rails. And it continues this way through the rest of the season. Where as far as this storyline is part of the deal, it is obnoxious. Where she's just like, oh, we're going to do this, and we'll take these nuts apart, and we'll fix this problem, and we'll weave them together, and we've got meta. And she's talking, I mean, given the way she's talking, you'd think she has advanced degrees in physics, engineering, metallurgy. I wrote down some others, so like about 10 other things, fabrication. I mean, you would think this kid has been to university, that she is an expert in all of these fields, listening to this conversation, and it doesn't get better. It gets worse as this storyline continues, and it is extremely unbelievable that the adult, the black guy standing behind her, would not be in charge, would not be watching this, being in charge, handling this stuff. Not the 17-year-old, 15-year-old, however old she is, girl who stowed away on the ship. This girl was a stowaway 15 minutes ago. Now she's what? Acting captain? It is the first time I've seen The Expanse really stumble. Now, please don't come at me and when you're watching this, and don't come at me with, well, if you read the book, then you'd understand. Okay. I haven't read the books yet because I didn't want to color my view of the show, okay? But if in a TV show, if it isn't shown, it didn't happen. You can't say, "Well, go read the book." People aren't going to read the book. People are just watching this show, and they're going to see this and feel exactly the same way I did. What the hell's going on here? That's not realistic. Anyway, so I want to let that go. But seriously, this is the first real misstep I've seen the writers and creators of The Expanse make. It is in this storyline with her being like, I know everything. It's just really unbelievable. So next scene, we see Murtry and Wee talking, and Murtry starts talking and giving this old story about how he survived this thing and made some money for the company. And it's kind of a bizarre conversation. And you know, so we see them here talking, and they're planning things out because Murtry is basically, this scene lets us see why Murtry has really been acting the way he has been acting this whole time. Because he gets a percentage of whatever they find there. So if they don't get the belters kicked off and removed, his cut is less. Now he's starting to realize that the machines, the technology on this planet is worth way more than any mineral rights and everything else. And he wants in on that. He wants to be able to make billions off of this. And it's just, it really shows the twisted nature of him. We really start to see just how bad he really is in this scene, because it's just all about money. He doesn't care about people. He doesn't care about anything but getting his cut. Now he feels cheated because he's done all this work, done all these things for this company, and they've made billions, and they've made mega amounts of money off of what he's done in the past, while he's made pittance. And so you can see his frustration. And I get that, but that's no excuse for what he's doing. And anyway, he's basically telling Wee here in this scene, you help me out, I'll make sure you make billions too. I'll make sure you and I are in on this together, and we're going to make it. And she's like, well, why do you feel like you got to buy my loyalty? Well, because of her relationship with Amos, Murtry doesn't completely trust her now and stuff. And you also get kind of a darker side of Wee's character, where you start to see that she might be all in for this, but you can't decide, because she's shown some real tender and compassion and an interest in Amos, but you wonder which one will win out in the end. But this is just kind of it's a dark scene, and it's really all just about greed. So from there's an RCE man that's found dead at the water purification area, And we find that it's one of the guys that was in the altercation with the Belter earlier. And his buddy goes, grabs the guy, runs him back to the watering hole, throws him in there, and proceeds to try and drown him. Murtry and Holden and we and everybody show up, and they say, "You let him go, or we will shoot you ourselves," because they've realized that they've got to keep the peace because everybody's going blind, and that there's bigger issues here all of a sudden. But we learned from the last scene that Murtry is planning to kill Holden because Holden's standing in his way. And we don't know how he's going to do it, but that's his plan. We just know he's going to try and do it in the future. So they break this up. They break up the fight, and the guy comes out of the water, and he's got these slugs attached to his face, look like leeches. Within seconds, he starts convulsing and keels over dead. And then a leech falls and hits the guy that was trying to drown him on the forehead. He pulls it off, and within seconds, he's dead. And they shine the light up above, and the ceiling is completely covered in these leeches that are falling. And then we cut back to Earth and Avasarala. They're putting their plan in place for how to deal with Marco and Eros. And they decide to take out their engines using the railgun and send the Marines in. And the mission goes big time sideways. Major mess up. Watching them shoot the engines with the railgun, it's really cool. It's a really cool visual, and it was interesting to watch. And then you see them go in and try and catch Marco and Eros. And just as the time they get to the bridge, the Marines come under fire, and then you see a Belter run over, hit something, and the feed goes dead, and the ship explodes, killing everybody on board. And that's where the scene cuts away and end of episode. So it was another great episode. There's a lot of action, a lot of things happening in this, a lot more information coming at us, and that's what I love. It just keeps you just moving, boom, 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 boom. These episodes are not boring. They are not bogged down with too much exposition. They've got just the right amount to keep everybody where we need to keep everybody informed, knowing what's going on. The only thing I found that was a problem in this episode is the storyline of the girl who's suddenly become an expert in saving ships from falling out of orbit. I mean, I wish I was like Felcia and could just go from high school to genius level in a moment. That would be fantastic. I mean, I'd be rich. Cool. Anyway, so great episode. Really enjoyed it. I love this show. It is so great. It never gets old. I go back and watch these episodes all the time, and I enjoy them every time as much as I did the first time. Hope you enjoyed this review. Let me know what you think. Let me know what your feelings are on this episode, what you liked, what you didn't like, and thanks for watching, and we will talk to you next time. Bye now.